Now, you've all probably heard of the 3 million target, but the biggest question is, with the target of an increase in 20% of BAME apprentices, is that achievable, given your honest opinion? And if so, or if not, what are the best practices, or what are the best practices in terms of recruitment or retention that, and anything else around it that you as an organisation do and can share with our audience today? Because there are some employers here, there are some training providers here, so we want to get the full perspective of it. But also, it's important that we get the perspective from an apprentice up to the employer and the research side as well. Becky.
I think some of them I've talked about. I guess one of the things that we're looking at is how do we maybe think about the concept of adopting a local school or college. So using almost the resource that we've got, because we've been using an outside provider to help us, because this is not my day job, this is just an add-on to my job that I do. So thinking about actually if we could get managers across the country to actually target a school or a college near them, then provide them with the tools to go in and talk about apprentices, to talk about actually apprentices per se as an avenue, as opposed to going to university or other routes, then that would be helpful. And we'd also want to look at from a hard to fill area, but also from the BAME percentage, and how do we represent our local community that they go into. So that's something that we're going to actively look at. The second thing is that I'm starting to connect with maybe our wholesalers and other organisations that we maybe sell to that have got a higher ethnicity demographics to ourselves and in the communities that they sell to, and how I think that we could make some connections with them. So, for example, could we offer an apprentice in our company, but also an apprentice in their company? We're still at very early days, but that's where my vision is, that I'd like to take it, that we try and, do some co-benefit or partnerships.
Matt?
I think for the 20% target, I'll answer that in two bits. My first view is that in the short term, probably not, and I think from a numbers perspective, it will actually get worse. And the reason being is one of the great things I'm looking at with regards to the apprenticeship levy is the fact you can now use apprenticeships as a training mechanism for your own employees. Now, if I look at the huge amount of upskilling and reskilling we need to do over the next 3 to 5 years with some of the changes that are coming across the utilities industry, because the utilities industry does actually change. It's not as boring as everybody makes it seem to be. It's a quick plug. We've got to have to do a huge amount of internal upskilling and reskilling, and absolutely we want to offset our 1.3 million pound levy that we've got to do some of that. That, looking at our operational workforce, which is 95% white and 85% male, those numbers will all be reflected somewhere in a government statistical package that will say actually all of our work will on paper have been absolutely undone because of all the internal apprenticeships. So we're starting to position the statistics internally about between new talent coming into the business and existing training. But I think from a pure stats point of view, the numbers may look worse. But I think eventually with the growing level of access and the business imperative that we've got, that the levy's forcing us to do, I think that number will climb and climb and climb. And I think as apprenticeships change, we have our first cohort of MBA masterships starting this year as well. You're starting to offer up opportunities of that level, the range of standards that are coming on stream over the next 18 months, and looking at the levels that they then can go in. There is no skills area I can see in our business that we can't put a new talent program into support, and the business is coming to me and saying we really want to do this. So I think if we combine that with the recruitment process that we've got and the right partnering up front, I think that in the medium term that number will be attainable. But I still think there'll be a statistical oddity while a ton of companies attempt to push through all the upskilling they've been holding off doing for the last 5 years, and now we have an absolute business imperative to do. But I do think it is about that, for me, it's about looking at that full employee life cycle. Attraction, resourcing, recruitment and selection piece, the unconscious bias element, the systems and processes, and then it's almost looking at the law of unintended consequences as you go through. So rates for promotion, for pay increases, access to opportunities, do we have the right, and little things down to interview panels, selection panels, when we have talent forums where we calibrate talent across the business, that's looking at that composition in the room, making sure we've got as broad a representation as we can have with the population. So we're starting to really look at, actually, we've got 5 managers who are promoting, we ended up with 5 managers who are promoting gender diversity at senior level, and 4 were male. And you can instinctively, things like that don't look right or feel right. So it's kind of going in and saying, we may have the right diverse range of opinions in the room. It doesn't necessarily follow that, sort of because you are male, you cannot have a view or a positive approach to this. But we need to make sure we're really checking on it. So it's not necessarily the person who waves their hand in the air to volunteer is the person. It's maybe sometimes the reluctant individual who actually say, you don't want to get in because you don't believe in this sort of thing, because you don't think it works. Well, fine, come in and tell us how to do it better. But that's, like I say, it is a really almost issue by issue, calling it all out and then thinking about what can we fix, what can we sort, but what ultimately is going to take 5, 10 years, maybe a generation to shift within the business. So, but I think it's being acknowledging and being clear about where those challenges are.
Fiona.
Thank you. I think given the underrepresentation we have at the minute, that just increasing the quantity of apprenticeships will mean that we won't hit the 20% target. If we do what we've always done, we will get what we've always got. But I think having a target does focus the mind, and I think therefore if we can use that to think about what we might do, then I think we should aim to achieve it and work hard to do that, and see what happens. I think a couple of other things around apprenticeship reform could make or break it. So we've already talked about the levy. The levy could be a great opportunity if employers are thinking about recruiting new people, to think about who they recruit, and also to think about which of their existing staff that they put onto apprenticeships, whilst recognising the point made that if your staff is predominantly white, then you don't have as many choices to correct that imbalance as you might have. The other target that I think could be quite helpful in helping meeting this one is the public sector target, where public sector institutions are required to have a number of apprenticeship starts. It's proportional to their workforce every year. And we've been doing some work with public sector employers like local authorities, like NHS trusts, and like education providers. And one of the things that they are really conscious of is that their workforce does not represent the communities that they serve, and that this is a great opportunity for them not only to tackle their ageing workforce issues, but to tackle some of the diversity issues. And I think if employers can be supported to think about how they attract a more diverse workforce, then we could make significant progress. But I think there are many conflicting drivers in the system, but it doesn't mean that we should not put out all the stops to try and make this work.
Chris.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm conscious of and slightly sceptical about is that with that target, that the quality of apprentices will decrease, and so that they don't have the skill set or the assets to actually do the job, and we're just trying to fulfill a certain quota. So that's my skeptical hat on. But I think you just got to be careful of how you approach it, and I think it's really, really important to not kind of focus too wholly on, okay, we need more BME apprentices, and but more kind of how do we kind of recruit them, doing things differently. I think you touched on something very, very, very interesting. I want to see kind of recruiters in churches and in mosques and stuff like that, and I think you've got to be slightly more radical with that approach. Speaking to families, as I said. So, as I said, my family are from Ghana. I had an offer to study at a Russell Group University, study economics. I turned around and said I'm doing an apprenticeship, and they nearly had a heart attack. So it's that whole education piece, and really, really getting them to understand that an apprenticeship doesn't necessarily mean, okay, you're going to be an electrician for your life, but there are a spectrum of apprenticeships being provided, white collar, blue collar, etc. But I think in terms of a short-term perspective overview, I think what the government is doing is very positive in terms of the advertising, the Get and Go Far campaign, the promotions, etc. And it's just really kind of looking at different talent pools. So I've had the privilege and the pleasure to attend so many different schools and various parts of the country. I've been over to Exeter, where not a lot of people look like me, or I've been over to East London and a lot of people look like me. It's that whole spectrum. But it's just really articulating the message around apprenticeships and how that can resonate with young people. And I enjoy doing it. So I suppose a few people have touched on the whole ambassadors piece. That's very, very positive. You guys are amazing at promoting it, etc. But I do think it does help when someone slightly younger, sorry, you're all young, but someone who's just recently been through the process, they can relate to them and say, hey, that used to be me, like 2 years ago. I was doing my GCSEs or my A-levels, and I can see that trajectory. Also, getting into schools, going into schools and liaising with them, having that schools partnerships, and sometimes even giving them a bit of cash to perform some workshops, around, career services in schools is quite shocking, but it's improving. For me, my career services was just, go to university, Oxbridge or Russ Group, do your A-levels, and that was it. So, but I think that is changing. But going into schools and saying, look, we have various offers on board. Can we work together, create some workshops and some fun activities, and provide insights into what we do in our company? I think that's so interesting. As I said, I love going to schools. They're often receptive of kind of hearing about apprenticeships, and I think that continues. That needs to be continued. So I think I touched on all the points that I wanted to address. So, but I do think long term, it's all around kind of changing that perception. And I think that's going to be a generational thing. Apprenticeships, just the connotations behind it and the impressions that it creates. It will be kind of a generational thing. Young people will think, okay, it's not just a thing to do. When my friends were going to university, it was, oh, why are you doing an apprenticeship? Well, why would you do that? Okay, I'm going to just do what my friends are doing. No, try and be, I suppose, articulating the benefits of my apprenticeship. So at the age of, I'll have a degree with no debt. I'll be paid a salary, and I've also had kind of a great experience at a top company. And a lot of grads will come out, just because their friends went to university or their family told them to go to university, with debt, and then going into an increasingly competitive market to find a job that they didn't really study for, or they haven't got the skill sets to actually perform the actual role. So it's just really being clear and getting apprenticeships on the same level as university, and as I said, I think that's going to be a long-term thing, but I think we're moving in the right direction. I'm a positive, proactive believer, so we'll get there.
I think the point about quality is really, really important, and I think it should be everybody's bugbear, actually, because even if we hit the numerical target, even if we get 3 million apprenticeships and 20% of those are a 20% increase for BAME, and we hit the other targets as well, then if we don't give those people good quality experiences, then those numbers won't sustain. You'll just have 3 million people doing low quality provision, and word will get around, and then as soon as we've hit that target, people will go back to I'm not going to do this because I know someone who did and they had a terrible experience and it didn't lead anywhere. And so while we need to think about numbers, most of all we need to think about the quality of those experiences. And it's great to hear about the quality of the two employers up here. And we would like to see every apprenticeship be of that quality, but I don't think we're there yet. And I think we need to make sure that we are getting really good, strong jobs with great training for each of those 3 million young people and adults, so that they are progressing to great jobs, great incomes. Because if we do that, then word of mouth will really spread the message, and that we won't need big advertising campaigns, because people like Chris will be going, I did an apprenticeship, it was the best thing I did. Look, he's going to come out with his degree and all the experience he's got at work and no debt. That is so much more powerful for people that he comes into contact with than any marketing campaign can. And so I think whatever we do to focus on numbers, we must put even more effort into focusing on quality.
Absolutely.